Vermicomposting turns organic kitchen waste into nutrient-rich compost with the help of worms. It's good for the environment and it's good for your garden. Cathy Nesbitt, a worm advocate, tells you how easy it is to make great compost for your garden. Welcome to Richters Seminars. This video presentation is from a series of free educational seminars on herb and garden topics offered each year at Richters.
So are you concerned about the environment? Are you awake out there? Wonder what more you can do? You're in the right place. Get worms, I say. I'm Cathy Nesbitt from Cathy's Crawly Composters. I'm a worm advocate and founder of Cathy's Crawly Composters. And how I got into worms, well, the Reader's Digest version is I was afraid of worms before starting my business. So anybody that's afraid of worms, okay, you're in the right place still. Hang in with me. I moved up to Bradford from Toronto in '93. And like most people that move out of the city, I had to still work in the big smoke to pay for my house. And so I would take the GO train, and as an avid gardener and composter, I would collect my co-workers' lunchroom scraps. This is '93. Of course, the garbage crisis was looming, but it wasn't in our conscious yet. So people thought I was crazy. I'd have my ice cream bucket, and I'd collect their coffee grounds, banana peels, etc., and I'd bring them home every day on the GO train. Well, one day, because if you compost, the more you put in, the more you get out, the better your garden grows naturally. So it was selfish. It had nothing to do with the environment. It did, but it didn't. So one day I forgot my bucket on the GO train, and I was devastated because I'd worked hard to save those scraps. And my husband and I were driving in the next day. I said, we have to stop at the GO station and see if they found my bucket. So yeah, it's true. So I went to the GO station. I said to the engineer, excuse me, did you find an ice cream bucket on the train yesterday? And he said, what was in it? So my first thought was, what was in the other ones? How many others did you find? I said, coffee grounds and banana peels. He kind of took a step back and said, no, we didn't find anything like that. Get on your way. And I said, well, I'll be taking the train again tomorrow. If you find my bucket, please keep it for me, and I'll collect it tomorrow. So that was fine. He kind of thought, oh, that's my weird person of the day. and that same day, I worked at the Commerce Court. And so I was taking the escalator up in the Commerce Court, and a woman behind me said, excuse me, do you take the GO train from Bradford? Do I have a sign? and I turned, I said yes, and she said, you forgot your bucket on the train. So anybody that's taken the GO train, on a regular basis, you always sit in the same, you get on the same car, you sit in the same spot, you see the same people, they're like family, you don't know them, but there they are, you see them every day. And so I thought, my poor GO train family, they must think, that girl, she doesn't make enough money, she has to use that dirty old bucket for her lunch pail. Anyway, so I got my bucket back. She said to me, you forgot your bucket on the train, it was still there. So I got my bucket back, hallelujah. So, all this time I was getting my psych degree, and I'm very persistent, I guess. It took me 15 years to get my psych degree at night, and I graduated in 2000. People said, what are you going to do with a psych degree? And I said, you'll see, I'll use it. I'm a worm farmer now, have fun. So in 2000, I graduated. I got a job at a group home working with challenged adults, and I loved it. They had 10 homes and a farm. I thought I had come home working with these clients. I loved it. I couldn't work with management. That's why I'm a worm farmer now. But they didn't compost at this facility. They had 10 homes and a farm, and they didn't compost. If you create any volume of this food scraps, you pay a lot to get rid of it. Because yesterday it was yesterday's dinner, today it's the devil. It smells, it attracts bugs, it causes trouble if it's not managed. And so if you produce any volume of that, restaurants, grocery stores, group homes, you pay a lot to get rid of it, because you have to get rid of it today, and today, and today. So I spoke to management and I said, why don't you compost? And they said, we don't need the fertilizer because we have cows. Oh, well, you still are producing lots of scraps and paying a lot to get rid of it. Okay, so that was the first time that I realized people don't connect what they do. Here they are producing all these scraps. They have all these people. They have a work program at this farm where they have a wood shop. They even have a greenhouse, and they make benches and they'll paint them, and then, let's have it green instead. So they'll sand it down, paint it again. So it's all fine. It keeps people busy, but they can be making compost. Anyway, just to back up a bit in this story, about 15 years ago, I looked after a teacher's worm bin. And I think that we should try stuff once, and then decide if it's for us or not. So although I was afraid of worms, I took on the challenge. And I looked after this teacher's bin, and it was a disaster. I would open up the lid, throw the food in, cover it up, because I didn't want to see the worms. I was afraid of them. I didn't even like that they were in my house, but I told this teacher I would look after them. It was a disaster, and I was a fruit fly manager, because, you know, if you've ever had fruit flies in your house and then you leave the scraps, you have more fruit flies. So I was a fruit fly manager, but I was determined after the whole summer of getting the compost out. So at the end of the summer, I put my big gloves on, sorted through it. It was awful, and I said, not doing that again. Now I'm up for worm farmer. Never say never. So fast forward again back to the group home. The greenhouse manager said, well, why don't we do vermicomposting? And I was like, oh, have you ever done something and you go, it didn't really work out as you had planned, and then someone mentions it later on and you go, oh, yeah, that didn't work out so well last time. But, you know, I had that feeling, but I was like, well, okay, let me look into this again. So I started to research the red wiggler worms and discovered that they eat half their weight per day. They live up to 10 years. They have 5 hearts each, and they turn garbage into gold. And that was really a magic defining moment for me. And I was like, wow, these worms are so great. And I had a shift. And one night I actually had a dream where I was harvesting worms, separating the worms in the cast, without gloves. And I woke up feeling quite peaceful. I didn't know what it meant until it was time for my backyard composter to be emptied. You know, the wheels of change at an institution take a long time. So although they were turning, they were going towards composting at the institution, I thought, I'm going to go ahead and get started on my own. So I set up my bin, and I made a couple of calls. I couldn't find worms. I couldn't buy worms to save my life. So I thought, oh, that's interesting. You can't buy worms year-round in Canada. But then it was time to empty my backyard composter. At this group home, I worked 3 days, 14-hour shifts, 3 days on, 4 days off. And I would bring home the scraps from my one house. So I would bring home 30 or 40 pounds of scraps every 3 days from this group home, from the one house. And so my backyard composter filled up. It was working beautifully, and time to be emptied. I think composting without worms is magic. So I don't take the stuff out of the little trapdoor at the bottom. I just take the whole earth machine off and then paw through it. And I always paw through my compost because it's magic. Like, it used to be carrots and, you know, recognizable scraps. And now it's, look at this beautiful stuff I can grow vegetables in. So there I was, time for my compost to be harvested, flicking through my composter, and there was red wiggler worms right in my backyard. It was like God had shone down on me. I was like, wow. And I had that dream, so I had seconds to grab the worms or not, because they don't like the light, so they were going to squirm away very quickly. So I grabbed those worms with my bare hands, and that was the first seed stock of my business. How fun. And then I ended up getting injured at work, and I was a freelance behavior management specialist. It sure looks impressive on a resume. But I had no safety net. So there I was, unemployed, with no benefits, no EI, none of that, and and an idea for a business. It was 2002, the same year that Keel Valley landfill closed, and Toronto started shipping garbage to Michigan. And you know, the worms eat food scraps, they eat paper, and this is a wonderful solution for a part of our garbage. And I truly believe the worms are going to play an ever-increasing role in waste management and soil production. Whew, that was a pretty long intro. So here we are. Thank you for coming today. And I'm really excited to share what I feel about these worms. I really hope that if anybody is afraid of in the audience, I don't think you are, because why would you be here? Unless you're sitting at the back. Yeah, so I really hope that you too can have a shift, or if it's not you in the audience that is afraid, that you can tell somebody else how magic these creatures are. So the worms we use for vermicomposting, and if anybody has questions as we're going through, please just let me know. It's pretty informal. So the worms that we use for vermicomposting are called red wiggler worms. There's 4,000 to 6,000 different types of worms. Night crawlers are one type. Red wigglers are another type. The night crawler is the worm that lives below the frost line and comes out when it rains. They go 4 to 6 feet below the surface and come up at night to draw their food into their burrow. The red wiggler only goes 4 to 6 inches into the surface, making them ideal to live in a container. And they have a different diet. The night crawler eats mostly carbon or leaves. And the red wiggler requires both carbon and nitrogen. So the leaves or leaves or paper is the carbon source, and the nitrogen is the food scrap. So that's the main difference between the two worms. I'm going to show you a picture of a pound of red wiggler worms. Here we go. So this is a pound of red wiggler worms, 800 to 1,000 worms. Sorry, it's just a photo. It's okay. 800 to 1,000 worms in a pound, 5 hearts each. 4 to 5,000 hearts in a pound of worms. So February is heart month. It's also should be worm month because all of those hearts. So a pound of worms, way more loving than a pound of chocolate. So next Valentine's Day, think of your lover with worms. Okay, so they're nature's original recyclers. Thank you. And laugh at my lame jokes anytime. They're nature's original recyclers, and they eat approximately half their weight per day in food scraps. So a pound of worms, half a pound per day, or 3 to 4 pounds per week. So this is just about 3 pounds of food. This is what a pound of worms can eat in a week. And it's pretty substantial. I mean, you may be looking at this going, well, we're vegetarian, we produce that much in a day. Well, whatever volume of scraps you produce, you need twice as many worms as just the basic volume or formula. Or if you live in an apartment, this is great to manage some of your scraps. The kind of stuff that you can put in your worm bin, all your fruit and veg, coffee, tea, pasta, rice, beans, grains, plant clippings, cereal. It's really endless what can go in, what stays out. No meat, no dairy, no sauce. So it's a much shorter list. So same idea as backyard composting. The same things can go in. So, how does this all work? Well, just like regular backyard composting, the worms require a carbon-nitrogen mix. The carbon that I use is shredded paper. Could be leaves, straw, cardboard, paper towel rolls, toilet paper rolls, drink trays, egg cartons, not the styrofoam ones, the paper ones. Any combination of those for your bedding. And then you need to add in about a liter of garden soil. The red wiggler worms don't live in the soil, but they require the microorganisms and grit that are in the soil to break down the food. And then you need to add in some agricultural lime or crushed eggshells. Worms breathe through their skin, so that helps to balance the acidity or the pH, so the worms don't get burned. And then enough water so it's the consistency of a wrung-out sponge. So in a container the size 1.5 liters to 2 liters. You mix all your ingredients together, and then add your worms right on top. Before adding your worms, you just do a squeeze test. A few drops should come out, and then it's the right consistency for the worms. So 3 key elements for successful worm composting: temperature, moisture, and airflow. So the temperature you want, room temperature, 16 to 28 Celsius. Moisture you want about 75%. And the airflow, meaning you want to have holes in your container. So we've got holes in the top of the lid. And it's not the container that's the important part, it's creating the right environment for the worms. They'll live anywhere. But this container is kind of nice because it has my company name on it. Okay, so you get your bin all set up, add your worms right on top. You don't need to mix them in, they naturally make their way down into the bedding. And then when you're going to feed your worms, you just pull back the bedding, make a little hole, add your chopped up scraps in the hole that you've made, make sure that it's covered so you don't get fruit flies, rotate around the bin bearing in different spots, and after about 3 to 5 months, the worms convert all the paper and the food to this. Here we go. Black gold. Fabulous. So this is actually a working worm bin. It's almost beyond harvest. The worms will consume the castings up to 7 times to get the nutrients out. So you get a finer cast, but you lose worms because it becomes toxic for the worms. So it's kind of, at a certain point you'll have a mass of worms. And the formula is worms are hermaphrodites, meaning male and female. Still takes 2 worms to reproduce. After the worms have mated, has anybody seen the swollen band on the worm, the fat part of the saddle? Anybody on the nightcrawler? That's always closest to the head. They have this kind of collar, or it's the clitellum. Anyway, it's not that kind of show, I know. Sorry, it is. It's true. Okay, now I'm red. So after they've mated, that swollen band secretes a substance which forms the egg or the cocoon, and then the worm kind of backs out of it, and the egg is left on its head. After they've mated, they both produce one of those cocoons. Up to 20 babies in each egg. 5 or 6 is the average. 3 weeks to hatch, 10 weeks to sexual maturity, and then every 7 to 10 days they produce one of those cocoons. Wow. Woo! So sometimes when I tell people that, their eyes bug out and they go, whoa, what am I going to do when I have too many worms? Impossible. It's impossible. Yeah, because they're nature's perfect creatures. So they manage their own environment based on available space and available food. So you would never be overcrowded with worms. You would, like at a certain point, you'll have masses of worms. That's good. So you can either take some worms out and set up another bin, so expand your system, or they'll regulate their own population. So when your bin looks like this, it's all converted. It's about 3 to 5 months, and I usually have a bin the same size, but we were double booked today, so my husband took the other bin, and so I was left with the little baby bin. But it's okay. It still works. So when your bin looks like that, it's time to harvest or separate the worms in the cast. The easiest way, if you're comfortable handling the worms, is called the dump and sort. That's the technical name. And the worms don't like the light, so they go down into the piles. You just scoop off the top section of each pile till you come to worms. There's no worms here. I took them off the plate. They hate sitting on these plates. Once you get your worms separated, it's about an hour or so to do a bin this size. Set up your new bedding, add the worms back in, and then use the fabulous castings, the black gold, to fertilize your plants. This is how I sell my castings. Comes in assorted flavors. This one's so good. Thank you, I know. Okay, so look at that. I screen and dry my castings just because I sell it. I mean, if you're going to use it, you can use it with little bits in it. You don't care. They're your bits anyway. Unless you're selling it, because people don't want to buy bits of banana peels and whatever. So once you get it all separated, add your worms back in, start the process again. If you think this is really cool, and I know you do because you're all here, but you think you don't really want to do the harvest part. Like, it might be fine the first couple of times, but then it becomes a chore, especially if it's your business, by the way. Then this is the deluxe model here. This is called the Worm Chalet. So fun. Manufactured in Ontario, which is really great. There's several different models of the tower composters. I've tried out 3 or 4 different models, and this is my favorite one so far. So just like the other system, there's 3 trays, and you have your shredded paper, your carbon source, whatever it is you choose to use. And as far as paper goes, you can use any paper. Newsprint is better than bond paper. I usually use a combination. I collect shredded paper from local businesses, and they don't usually shred up newsprint. So I get bond paper from them. I mix it with the newsprint because it's more absorbent. But you can also use well, whatever you choose, but stay away from magazine paper. It's got a lot of chemicals and a lot of gloss, so I would just stay away from that. Or yeah, that's pretty much for the paper. So you bury your scraps in the bedding. There's holes in the bottom of each tray. I'll show you this one. There's holes in the bottom of each tray. So in about a month to 2 months, your tray will fill up. You start with the one tray on the bottom. When the tray fills up, you just simply place another tray on top, where in the single unit you have to do your dump and sort and separate the worms. In the chalet, the worms will migrate up. They'll follow the food, so they migrate to the next level. By the time you're putting your third tray on, the first tray is converted castings. Very few worms. You know, like people, when you put your first tray on there, some of the worms will be like, nope, we know what we got here, we're going to stay right here. And the others will go up and follow the food, like the natural cycle. And then by the volume gets reduced, so if it's not touching the bottom, the worms can't jump, they can't get to the next level. So by the time they decide, yeah, you know, okay, we're ready now to go upstairs, they can't get there. Because if it's not touching, they can't jump, so they're stuck there. And that's okay because they work the castings. So they'll just keep on consuming the castings to get all the nutrients out. And by the time you get to that tray, those worms will have, they're mostly water. So when they die, they decompose overnight. And so they just become part of the compost. And you get really fine compost. One of the beautiful features about the chalet, there's no holes in the top. A lot of the tower composters have holes in the top. So if you leave it outside spring, summer, and fall, and it rains, you have to make sure that it's either covered or out of the rain. So that's not the case. And it's also got a sloped roof. So when it does rain, the excess moisture or the rain just drains right off. Now, when you want to move your trays, you just place the roof on the ground. It lays flat, and then you can stack your trays in it. And I just discovered this year. It's such a great feature because otherwise, I have one of these in my kitchen. Otherwise, where am I going to put the castings that may be gooping out the bottom? Maybe some worms are kind of trying to get out of the bottom. So you just stack your trays, then you take your bottom tray out, and you use the magic castings to grow your fruits and vegetables. Great. This also has a tap at the bottom. So the tap at the bottom, as food breaks down, the gas gets released, so the methane, and then the juice gets released. In a single unit, you have to be careful that it doesn't get too wet on the bottom. Yeah, in the chalet, not a big deal. The excess moisture will drain down. You can drain it off. If it smells bad, it's anaerobic. Plants always require aerobic bacteria to grow. So if it smells bad, it's bad. Just throw it away. If it doesn't smell bad, then you can dilute it and water your plants. And with the chalet, if you're on your first tray, it's probably just leachate more than compost tea, so you would probably just discard that. As you get to the third tray, it's draining down through 2 beautiful trays of black gold. So it's more likely to be usable by the time you get to the bottom. But if somebody's using the chalet to make the tea, I would suggest taking some of the worm castings and brewing your own tea. And this is tea for your plants, by the way, like liquid fertilizer. All right. How are we doing? Everybody all right? Am I going too fast? Okay. So I wanted to talk about some of the, yeah, go ahead. Oh, thank you. Does this get very smelly? Thank you. This is aerobic process. Composting is always aerobic process, meaning with oxygen. It should never smell like rotting food. I mean, if I opened up my bag of food, although it's fairly fresh, it probably would smell bad. This is just rotting food. If you're a composter, outdoor composter, compost pile, your worm bin, if they smell like rotting food, it's rotting food and not composting. So it's, no. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, it can be outside spring, summer, and fall. I mean, preferably indoor year-round would be the optimum, because worms really don't like temperature change at all. So outside, if you have it outside in the summer, maybe it's going to get really hot during the day, cool at night, you know. So if you can keep it inside, that would be best, or in a garage. And then in the winter, it would have to be brought right inside. Does that? Yep.
Right, you said you got your original red wigglers from outside.
Yes.
So, if you, like, they will survive the winter outside.
Right, thank you. So the comment was that I said I got my original ones from outside. You can add these worms to a backyard composter. They're not soil dwellers, so you don't have to worry they're going to be invading all over the place. They stay right in the compost. They grow in organic matter, so compost pile, manure pile, rotting stuff. That's where the red wigglers live. So if you add them to a backyard composter, they do the turning for you. They speed up the process. Yeah, they do the turning, so they allow you all this free time. And I imagine people slogging away. I wish there was a better way than turning my compost. I spend so much time here. Like nobody does, I know. Get worms, everybody. Add worms into your composter. They do the turning for you, speed up the process, and create a finer product. In the fall, when they sense the temperature change, they breed more than usual, deposit their eggs throughout, and then they hibernate until it warms up. And unless you're diligent to keep your compost going, it freezes, and the worms, they don't freeze. I mean, they have 5 hearts, so that must keep them going. In the spring, as long as the thaw is gradual enough, they come out of their hibernating state, keep going. If it's a harsh winter, freeze thaw, nobody wants to be frozen more than once, come on. The worms may not survive, but the eggs will overwinter. So, yeah, and I've heard that, I read somewhere that the worm eggs can last up to 40 years until hatching, until conditions are right. So how clever. They're just really wonderful creatures. Yeah, so I wanted to talk about some of the projects that I've done with my worms. My worm farm was growing, and I needed more food for my worms because they eat a lot. Otherwise they die off, right? They regulate their population. So as a worm farmer and a worm seller, I don't want my worms to die. So I said, what can I feed my worms? Well, in Bradford we had 9 coffee shops at the time. A couple have closed now. And so I thought coffee grounds would be a great thing to feed my worms. I don't have to process it really. I don't have to chop it up. And it doesn't smell. It doesn't attract fruit flies. That's the perfect food source. That's what I'll do. So I went to the coffee shop named after the hockey player, and I said, we have 3 of them, and I said, I'm the worm farmer in town, and I wonder if I could collect your coffee grounds. And just because you're a franchisee doesn't mean that you're the boss. They said to me, well, we have to contact head office. So I said, okay, I'll come back. So I ended up going back 4 times. Yeah. By the time I went the 4th time, they probably were like, oh, why isn't she going to get the message? We don't want to play. Anyway, so they said, you can't take our coffee grounds because there's a written policy that our coffee grounds have to go in the garbage. Can you imagine that meeting? So what are we going to do with our coffee grounds? I don't know. What can we do? Oh, we can't go home until we decide what we're doing with these coffee grounds. Come on, somebody, come on. Let's throw them in the garbage. Yes, okay, somebody write that down. Let's throw our coffee grounds in the garbage. Yeah. So they throw their grounds in the garbage. So I said, well, I'll take all your garbage. Thankfully they said no. Can you imagine? Yikes. We have a 1-bag limit in Bradford, and so that would have just been bad. Anyway, so I left there thinking all coffee shops are going to have this policy that, their grounds have to go in the garbage. I kind of thought that. But then I thought, wait a minute, 9 coffee shops, 3 named after the hockey player, that leaves 6 coffee shops. I still have a playing field here. So I went to Country Style. We have 2 of those. Traders. I don't know why you need Traders in a little town, but anyway, Traders. And so the second Country Style is not in the best location. If you have a retail spot, you want a good location. It's hard to get in and out of sometimes. So I went to the franchisee and I said, I'm the worm farmer in town. I wonder if I could collect your coffee grounds. Well, they jumped all over it because, I said that I would increase business. That's probably why. But and I meant it. I thought, when people find out that you're managing your coffee grounds in a good way, the environmentalists are going to flock to your shop. I mean, they're going to carpool, take the bus, ride their bike. They'll have their to-go mug, but they'll be flocking there. Anyway, so he participated in my project. I went every day and collected 1,100 pounds of coffee grounds and filters from the slowest shop in town. Yeah, what is the hockey players' coffee shop doing? See, I don't name them. I know. I'm not plugging them. Pardon me? I know, I agree. It's not burnt. It's true. Anyway, so for some reason, I was getting the coffee grounds and the filters. Of course, the the filters are carbon source, right? It's paper. So the worms would eat that too, but I was separating the coffee grounds and the filters. Too much time. I mean, my backyard smelled wonderful. Can you imagine coffee grounds? It smells great. So there I was, separating the coffee grounds and the filters, and I was going faster and faster, getting so much stuff done this month. Woo! Flying around. Oh, sorry, plant. See, things were knocking over. And somebody said to me, your coffee ground project? And I said, yes. And they said, do you wear gloves? And I said, gloves? What? No, it's coffee grounds. And they said, have you heard of the nicotine patch? So I was like, oh my gosh, caffeine careening through my veins. No wonder I'm having heart palpitations and I can't sleep. My poor husband. Anyway, so I wore gloves after that because it's important to look after yourself. Yeah, that's a true story. And I'm pretty high energy already, so you can imagine. Anyway, yeah. So my next project involved grocery store waste. Similar story to the coffee shop in that I went to the largest in town. And I thought, if you're going to do something, you might as well go to the top, right? So I went to the biggest grocery store in town, and I said, I'm the worm farmer in town, and I'd like to collect your unsellable produce. You go into the produce or the grocery store and everything looks marvelous because all the rotten stuff is taken off. I was immediately embraced by environmental produce manager. They're gonna help the environment, they're gonna help a local business, and they're gonna save money. It's a win all around. So not only did they participate in my project, they gave me staff to help me load my car with 3,300 pounds. I diverted that month. 2 tons in 2 months. Can you imagine? Wow. So that month, it's really interesting. It's all about people. So this was really interesting month. All this food, I had no clue that the No Frills in Bradford, by the way, is a little teeny grocery store. It's not a big honkin' super center or anything. It's just a little grocery store. 3,300 pounds of food that they paid for on the way in, and then it didn't get sold. Now they're paying to dispose of it. It's not a good business model. And it's really wasteful at society. So a lot of this food was still good because, I don't know how the grocery industry works. I don't even pretend to know. They must have to order in advance. They can't phone the day before. We need more apples. No, they have to order in advance, I guess. So it must be really difficult around holidays, Thanksgiving, Easter, Christmas, whatever. How do we know? Are the people even going to shop here? Maybe they're going to shop. They're going to be out of town. So it must be really tough, but the new apples come in. The old apples have to go somewhere. And so a lot of them end up in landfill. So I intervened. I was really proud. Yay, 3,300 pounds. Darn, what am I going to do with this stuff? It's way too fresh, my worms. They eat rotten stuff. So I spent my days driving around to nursing homes, shelters, and food banks giving the food away. And it was really interesting because food banks can't take fresh food unless it's the day they're giving it away or the day before. So that's tough timing. the nursing home said, our clients don't eat any fresh food, and we don't have any fresh food here. I know. Yeah, how sad for the clients that live there. Don't sign up for that nursing home. I mean, everything's prepared off-site and brought in. So, yay, how wonderful. And so, but they did say, all we can take are bananas. Our clients can eat bananas. They don't need teeth for that. Great. Okay. They didn't say that. By the way, that's not how they put it. That was my little added part. So that was an interesting kind of mental note. So, I went to a shelter system. It's in East Gwillimbury, which is just south of Bradford. And they have women's shelter, men's shelter, and there's a home for challenged folks there. And they must have thought that God had shone on them the day that I drove up their driveway, because they don't have a budget for fresh fruit and vegetables, like the nursing home, but they don't at least pretend about it. And so they were thrilled. They took the fruit and they took all the stuff that I was bringing. They took what they could, because it was still good food. It really was not garbage. It was still good food, edible. They would take what they could for soups and stews, whatever, to feed their clients, and then they composted the rest. It was a beautiful closed-loop system. And they said to me, this is so great. As if I'm all hooked up in the grocery store chains, they said, is there another grocery store that would give us the scraps? And I said, well, I don't know, but this is my business, and this is volunteer. So why don't I hook you guys up? And then if you have any overs, you can toss them my way. Great. So that's what we did. It's all about people. So that worked out really great at the beginning. They would go every day, collect the scraps, bring them back, process it, take what they could. I used to joke with one of the clients there, because he started a garden, composting then a garden. I said, wow, maybe one day you'll be supplying No Frills with fruit and vegetables. How fun. So one day, anyway, before I hooked them up, I collected 40 cases of bananas. 40 cases, 40. And I was so sad that day. I mean, I was happy, yay, the nursing home, they wait till they see me coming. And all their people will be eating bananas. I was really happy that, the nursing home would be happy. Yay, I diverted them from landfill. But these bananas didn't even live their purpose. I mean, they grew up in the Caribbean, and then they made their way to Canada by boat or however they get here. They went to the food terminal, probably, however food manages around. And then they ended up in Bradford. And now, sorry for you bananas, you're on your way to landfill. You don't get a chance. But I intervened, and so I collected those bananas. This was great. I went to the nursing home, and I said, I have bananas, 40 cases. Do you want them? And so the person that I spoke with said, you need to talk to the administrator. So I said, okay. So I went, I found the administrator, and she said, you have to ask the head cook. So I said, okay. So this is all volunteer, remember. I'm giving them bananas. I find the head cook, and I said, I have bananas. Would you like them? And she was going to send me to somebody else, believe it or not. And I said, please, I'm giving you bananas. Make a decision, somebody. So they took a bunch just to make me, stop me talking. They took 6 bananas or something. Wow. Anyway. Whew. So it's all about people, and we're a big wasteful society. So I really believe these worms, by the way, the long of all of that, is that these worms are going to play an ever-increasing role in waste management and soil production. My next project, I did mention I'm from Toronto, but, and I was afraid of worms. My next project involved manure management. Yep, I know. And I was afraid of cows. I know. I know. And I know they're sacred in India. How could you fear them? Yeah. I had heard, this was after Walkerton, I heard that that worms could reduce manure piles by up to 80%, reducing or eliminating gram-negative bacteria, E. coli, Salmonella, Shigella, and I said, wow, wouldn't that be cool to know if that was true? This was very unscientific what I did, but I went to a local dairy farm in Bradford, and I said, I'm the worm farmer in town. I heard that worms can reduce manure piles, blah, 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 my little story. And I was wondering if we could do a project, if we could just do a little project. And he said, sure. And he happened to have this space that was separated off with electrified fence. And I thought, yay, I'm afraid of cows. How wonderful, I'll be in a little separated zone. And the reason they had, the reason they had the electrified fence is because when it rained, it would come down this hill. There was a building right beside, and so it would kind of shoosh there and make a big mucky pile. And the cows would come and plump around there, and the farmer didn't want that. So they put up this electrified fence, and I was so happy. So we set up our little pit, and added the manure, added the worms. This was August when I went there. And I didn't know being afraid of cows and stuff, and only driving on the highway, seeing is it the Jerseys or the Holsteins that are black and white? Holsteins, thank you. So I see the Holsteins. They look like Dalmatians. Oh, look how cute they are. They're huge. Yeah, cute. So anyway, so I have this pit set up. The challenge was, although I was in this electrified fence, the watering trough for my worm pit was the cow's watering bucket thing. And I didn't know, like that 80 head of cow, and I didn't know that when you step your foot on the field, they think it's milking time. So they're all out there. I go, oh, good, they're out there. Go to my pit. I look up. Oh, no, they're looking at me. What are you doing with our stuff? And I'm looking at them. Oh, get back out in the field. It's not milking time yet. Anyway, I'm over my fear of cows now. I'm really tall now. Look, I'm not afraid of worms. I'm not afraid of cows. How wonderful. So this was a great little project. So everything was going fine. It was just an outdoor pit. And winter was kind of looming, and I thought, what am I going to do in the winter with my worm pit? So, worm composting is a mesophilic process. Regular composting is thermophilic process, heating up. Worm composting is mesophilic or even temperature. So I wanted to create some of that thermophilic activity. So I had the farmer add some fresh manure, like about a foot of fresh manure on my pit to create the heating up. That'll keep them warm for the winter. Good. And then I had him add a foot of straw on the top of that, and then I put a tarp over it. And then I prayed all winter. It snowed a lot that winter, so there was additional insulation with the snow on top. So this was all great. I didn't open it at all during the winter. In the spring, I went over to my worm pit, and I wasn't sure, what am I going to find? I didn't know what would happen with my pit. I pulled back the tarp, I parted the straw, and there was massive worms in there. They were really the size of night crawlers. I was thrilled. And I do have worms here, so I can show you how little cute these worms are. But these were huge honking worms, but I was so thrilled. I did a dance around my worm pit. Yay, woo! I grew worms outside in Canada. Yay! I rock. And I'm sure the farmer was going, Jean, keep the kids in. We invited her on our property. So I was thrilled, really. I was so happy that I had grown worms outside. Then that summer it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and my worms drowned, and I was sad. But I won't leave you down here, don't worry. Up here, yay, winter, boo, they drowned in the summer. How sad. But it was a great lesson because the majority of red wiggler worms are imported from the States. Yep, they are. And they're imported from the States because winter is our challenge. Yeah, so I'm still looking to create a worm growing industry in Canada, but yeah, I lost my train. I can't believe I got derailed. My worms drowned. That's why I'm still mourning. So I have to bring you back up. Yeah, so I'm creating, so I'm in the process of creating a worm growing industry in Canada. That's where I'm headed. But yeah, so I'm really, really thrilled with all the stuff. My next project involved, so that was, it wasn't a failure because the worms survived the winter. That was my goal. I didn't think about rain and them drowning. How sad. And by the way, these gentlemen at the front were asking me about large scale composting. So I have to mention that when I was thinking about doing this manure management project, somebody had mentioned that you need to have mesh on the bottom because moles eat 3 times their weight and they love worms. And I was like, that seems like an extra step to me. I don't want to do that. Have you ever tried to cut corners and you go, I'm just going to skip that step. Well, I got a great message because I've got a compost demonstration site in my backyard and I've got all kinds of outdoor insulated bins. And another worm grower from another part of Canada came to visit me. And so I said, come and see my property. And so we went out back and we went on a tour, and I had never had a mole in my backyard until this day. And so I opened up one of my things and I'm like, what's happened here? So there's all these wonderful little tunnels that look like a subway in my worm bin. And she said, you have a mole. But the good news is that if you have a mole, you probably only have one because they eat 3 times their weight. They need a big area. Great. I only have one mole. I don't have any worms now, but I have only one mole. And what am I going to do with their poop? So that was a great message before doing this thing at the farm, that I did need to line it with mesh. So I lined it with mesh, and on the top you need to put landscape fabric or something because birds also love worms. So anyway, that was a great thing. My next project involved donkey. I've done cow manure, horse manure, and donkey manure. So donkey manure, this was fun. This was at John Candy's old property in Queensville. He had a farm there, and John Candy was one of my favorite Canadian actors, comedians. whenever I was in this farm of John Candy's, I felt like he was there with me. It was really quite an amazing thing. But he had a cow barn, and so it was a cement feeding trough, I guess you call it. Sorry, I don't have the proper terms, but whatever the feeding trough was, it was cement. So I lined it with plywood, just so it wasn't so cold for the worms. And then I added in the people that own the property now had 2 donkeys, Rosemary and Sage. So I would go around and collect their stuff and their charcoal nuggets, their charcoal briquettes, and put them in this system. And it was really, really fun. It all worked out great. When it came time to harvest the donkey manure project, there was still some undigested donkey nuggets, and they were covered with worm eggs. And I thought, why are the worm eggs here? And I just thought, I couldn't figure out why they were clustered around this donkey nugget. Until I realized when the worms breed, I already talked about the reproduction, then the egg is on the head. They need a little bit of friction to deposit the egg in the soil or in the system. So the donkey nugget provided the friction that they needed and a food source for the worms when they were born. I know. Brilliant. So clever. And I tell the story to kids. I don't know that they understand, the inner city kids. They don't really get farming and stuff. So when I talk about it's fun talking about manure and charcoal briquettes and stuff. But anyway, not that they know what that is with gas barbecues. And the eggs, by the way, the worm eggs are the size of a grape seed. And it's really hard. I'm still trying to come up with a new reference because kids don't know how big a grape seed is because they're seedless now. How do they make new grapes? I don't know. Okay. Any questions? Or should I just keep on entertaining you? Okay. All seriousness aside. What? How could all seriousness be put aside? All joking aside. I really am in the process of creating something big here. It's been 8 years since I started my business. It's supporting myself, my husband, a part-timer right now, and we really are creating an industry. I chose media as one of my marketing strategies, and I've had over 100 articles, TV, radio. I've won several awards, and just because I think that it just helps raise the level of awareness about this. If people don't know about it, they're not calling me, and they're not doing worms. And, when Keel Valley Landfill closed in 2002, that's when we started shipping garbage, of course. Almost 200 garbage trucks at the beginning of the program, making their way one way to Michigan, almost 400 kilometers. And not the cute little garbage trucks that go in the residential area, honking transport trucks, 18-wheelers, 200 per day. Now with new programs that they've brought in, green bin, expanded blue bin, raised awareness about, stop buying all this stuff, everybody. You don't need any more stuff. Except from Richters. So now they're down from 208 years, they're down to 67 trucks. So better, but still a long ways to go. And, the green bin program, I don't want to slag the program or anything. It's all part of the, I don't know. The government's put a lot of money into the program. It's still not really that sustainable, and it's a second solution for people that live in a house. If you live in a house, now you could compost in your backyard, or you could green bin. I understand that you can put more in your green bin. I get that. But if you live in a condo, townhouse, your school, business, grocery store, you're still not being served by a green bin. All your organic stuff is still going in landfill. So worms are certainly a portion, and I think that it's a much more sustainable solution to either compost or worm compost on site. This really does offer an on-site solution. It doesn't smell. It's fairly easy to manage. And when I started my business, I had a call from a woman. She had been doing worm composting for 10 years, and she said it was becoming a bit much, and she was looking for a home for the worms. Would I like them? So I had just started my business. I didn't really necessarily want the worms. I wanted to meet this woman who'd been doing it for 10 years. I could learn from her. So I said, sure, that would be great. So she said, well, let me just get the soil out, and then I'll call you back. So I said, okay. So she did her harvest. She called me 2 weeks later, and she said, I got the soil out, but the worms were dead. The worms had all died. Do you want the container? So I said yes, but I didn't want the container. I wanted to meet this woman. So I arrived at her house. She was probably in her late 70s, early 80s. She had MS. She was in a wheelchair. And I really admired this woman because I said, wow, even though you're in a wheelchair, you have your own challenges, you still care enough to manage your scraps in a sustainable fashion. So I said, well, so when was the last, I didn't say that to her, but that was my thought. And so I said to her, when was the last time that you harvested? And she said, in 10 years, I never harvested. That was interesting. See, the worms will reduce the volume. The volume keeps reducing. You adding scraps in, it reduces. It gets heavy. I mean, your bin will get pretty heavy. She didn't lift the bin around. She said it was under the bed in her guest bedroom. Yeah, I know. I love it. I love this woman. And she said, sometimes I would tell people it was there, and sometimes I wouldn't. I was thinking, yeah, if they stayed too long, they found out about the worms soon enough. Yeah, there's worms under your bed, by the way. Get out. So she said she would just pull the bin out when she needed to get the soil. Of course, the worms are photosensitive, afraid of the light. They go down into the piles. She would scoop off what she needed and then just continue the process. She said she never once had fruit flies. She never had odor. She never had any issues. And I was like, can you write that down? That would be really great for my business. And anyway, so I just really thought that it's amazing. And I thought that you did have to harvest, but as long as you keep layering, as long as you have the right carbon nitrogen, the castings are going to be at the bottom. So you can keep on working up. Your castings are going to be at the bottom. And just for the sake of the gentleman at the front about talking about large scale, if you're going to do, and I'm going to talk about manure management rather than large scale grocery, but the same would apply. So for manure management or windrow composting, you want to have land. That would be beneficial. And then you want to line dig a hole, like maybe a foot deep or so, however wide you want. Line it with mesh, because the moles will clear you out in no time otherwise. And you can plant castor plants at the edges, and that will help keep the moles, manage the moles too. So you line it with mesh, and then put your manure or your compost, whatever you're going to use as your bedding and feedstock. Add your worms in, and then add your stuff on top every week. If you're going to use fresh manure or fresh raw compost, like raw food scraps, you're going to add no more than 2 inches on top of each week, because you don't want it to start cooking. If it starts cooking, you're going to cook your worms. So you just add a couple of inches on top. The worms will keep on, they're surface feeders, so they're going to keep on eating from the top, and the stuff will be at the bottom. But when your pile gets about 3 feet high, then you start another pit beside. And then you add your stuff in. The worms are going to migrate over. It takes time. It's not overnight. It takes time for this to happen. But then the worms will all have left your pile. You have a wonderful pile of castings, maybe some worm eggs, maybe some worms. And then you just keep moving. Then you can go back and forth. So that's one way. And if you want to get in touch with me afterwards, we can talk more about large scale. Any questions? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could reiterate what the ideal humidity.
Yeah, it's about 75% humidity. Once you get your, like what you do is you take your bedding. For the folks that arrived a little bit late, it's carbon nitrogen, so the carbon is the shredded paper. You need about 1 liter of soil for a bin this size, some crushed eggshells, 6 to 8 eggshells, crushed up. They don't need to be powdered. And then enough water so it's the consistency of a wrung out sponge. And so you mix everything together. Your bin should be about half full of moist shredded bedding. And then you do a squeeze test. You just squeeze kind of lightly. A few drops should come out. Better too wet than too dry. And I do a lot of school workshops. So I've sort of had to adjust what I say there, because if you're in a grade 2 class, they're squeezing and you can hear it's really, really juicy. It's so wet, but they can't squeeze. They're squeezing to save their life and no water's coming out. It's like, okay, yeah, it's wet enough. But there where you get a man who it's bone dry, but they're going to get something out of it. So, yeah, so it depends on who's doing the squeezing. So just squeeze lightly, a few drops. There we go. So about 75%. Does that, sorry, I went off on a. And there's a lid, yeah. And I used to think that the lid was a psychological barrier. You can see there's holes in here. I used to think that the lid was a psychological barrier. I mean, the worms are eating half their weight. They don't have eyes. They can't talk. But if they did, they wouldn't be out sightseeing. There's no time. They're eating half their weight. Thank you. The lid does provide darkness. So then you can keep your bin anywhere. If you didn't have a lid, then you'd have to keep it in a dark spot. So it doesn't have to be in a closet. It doesn't have to be hidden away. It can be front and center. And there's actually furniture. You can make like a bench, a worm composter, which would be really great. And then you can, so it's a functional piece of furniture. You could tell people or not. Yeah, so there's all kinds of ways. Again, it's not the container. It's creating the right environment for the worms. And then there's the tower composters as well, which is a great way too. And you can make your own tower composters too, by the way. Yeah.
The mesh, if you're doing a
large
size, what sort of size or what type of mesh are you using?
I think it's 1/8 of an inch hardware cloth, if that makes sense. Is that, yeah. Quarter or an 1/8 will probably work, because the moles won't be able to get through 1/4 of an inch either. Yeah. Anybody else? Yeah.
Does it need to be checked on weekly, or can you leave it for a couple of weeks if you go away?
Yeah, if you're going away for a couple of weeks, no problem. Have a great time. The worms will be glad. They really don't like to be disturbed. So so you just add a little bit of extra food in when you're going away, and then 2 weeks is fine, especially if your bin's been going for a month or more. Then there's going to be lots of food in there for them to eat. 2 weeks is no problem. If you're going for 3 weeks or more, take them with you. They like holiday too. Or get a worm sitter. You know, you would have someone come in and water your plants. Just, throw an apple core in my worm bin.
Can you add daily, or do you need to?
Can you add daily? Yes, you can, but the worms don't like to be disturbed. So if you can feed them 2 or 3 times per week instead, if you can allow your scraps to start to decompose, that's going to speed up the process. The smaller you chop up your scraps, the more exposed surface, the faster it breaks down. The more the worms can eat is the basic formula. An additional thing you can do, you can freeze your scraps, which changes the molecular structure. If you've ever grown a tomato and said, "Oh, I'm so having a tomato sandwich in February," you put your tomato in the freezer, and February comes around, you're like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to have a tomato sandwich." You put your toast down, you get your tomato out of the freezer, and then, well, your toast is cold by the time it thaws. But anyway, no, you've thawed it first. It's tomato soup, right? You can't slice it. Same thing happens to your scraps. So that changes the structure. Then you can pour off any water. If you're doing it in a single unit, you have to be careful it doesn't get too wet. So that helps you to manage your moisture, and you can add more in, because of course the water that you're pouring off is weight. So you pour off some extra weight, or if you have a juicer, the pulp from the juicer is a wonderful thing. It's like pre-chewed food for the worms. Now you want to be careful not to add too much pureed stuff, because then you may create anaerobic conditions, right? You may squish out the oxygen. It's really a balancing act, but it's not. It sounds complicated. It really is not. The worms are very forgiving, and they really do adapt to different conditions. If you get older, then you've created anaerobic conditions. You just need to sort of fluff it up a little bit, stop feeding for a bit, remove some of the rotting food. Some food breaks down faster than others. Root vegetables, of course, take longer than lettuce or things like that.
Do you have to wash the eggshells out?
It's best if you do. With the eggshells, what I do with eggshells, once I've cracked my eggs, I just give them a quick rinse and air dry them. They crush up really nice when you've done that. Otherwise, the goo kind of glues them, and they don't crush up very nice. And there probably could be some issue with like salmonella or something if you don't wash them, depending how long they're going to be sitting there. So just as a precaution, I would say rinse them. You don't have to rinse them for the worms, though. They don't care. Now, I do want to talk about fruit flies, though, because I did talk about burying the scraps so you don't get fruit flies. Fruit flies are not a necessary part of worm composting, but they coexist quite nicely. They don't bug the worms at all, but they bug us. So, I'm going to use bananas as my example. When you buy the bananas, wherever you get them from, you bring them in. The eggs are on there already. And as they start to get ripened and speckled, the fruit fly eggs, it is the perfect environment for them to hatch. They hatch, fly around, they bug us. As long as those bananas are there, they have somewhere to lay their eggs and continue the cycle. So before adding your scraps into your bucket, or if you're going to freeze it, just give it a quick rinse. Anything you don't generally wash, orange, banana, melon, that will wash off the fruit fly eggs. That's your first defense. And then making sure that your scraps are well covered in the bedding. And you're adding additional bedding as you go, additional shredded paper as you go as well. To make sure that you can bury the scraps. So it's really, really important. Well, I guess not so important if they don't bug you, but... But, I think I mentioned my first attempt at looking after a teacher's bin probably about 15 years ago now. It was horrible. I was a fruit fly farmer, and every time I opened up the lid, I just threw the food in because I was afraid of the worms, and the food was just on top. And yeah, it was just like the fruit flies were like, "Ooh, wee, this is so great." And they were pocking my face as I opened up my bin. It was gross. And I said I would never do it again. But it's not a necessary part. And I do a lot of school workshops. When I started my business, I heard that a pound of worms and their descendants could transform a ton of organic waste in a year. A ton. Wow. That's a lot. And I heard that the average Canadian family produces a ton of organic waste in a year. So I said, wow, every family needs a pound of worms, and I'm just the one to put a pound of worms in every house. And then I started to do, trade shows and green events and festivals. Wherever I could have a table, I'd be there with my worms. And people would be at my neighbors, finding out about whatever over there, and then they'd come to me and they'd say, so what are you doing here? Like, it's not obvious enough. I have worms, I'd say, and they'd say, oh gosh, and they'd step back and they'd hold their cat, it's dirty. And so I realized, wow, I wasn't the only one that was afraid of worms. Other people are too. And so I thought, how am I going to put worms in every house if people are afraid? And not afraid like that they're going to harm you, just that they're icky or whatever. We don't respect them like we ought. So I started to do school workshops, and over 50,000 students have seen my presentation to date. Yay, how fun. And the kids so get it. The challenge with having worms in a school is that the kids want to touch the worms. Yeah, so that's one of the challenges, is they don't really like to be disturbed and stuff, but it really offers a wonderful fundraising opportunity. Selling the castings, the worm poo. Who doesn't want to sell worm poo? Who doesn't want to buy it? I don't know. They buy chocolate and stuff. So we really, for schools, there's so many lessons, there's so many opportunities for learning in schools. And so I'm really, that's one piece that I'm so proud about is the kids that have gravitated to this, and they love it and they take it on. They eat healthier. Some teachers have said, having worms in my class, some of the students want to eat better because they'll come up, they'll be eating chips or something. Oh, yeah, I want to feed the worms. Oh, thank you for your interest. Great. But they don't eat chips. They don't eat cookies. They don't eat the wrapper. If you want to feed the worms, you'll have to bring in some, something that they can eat. And, then they get angry calls from the parents. What have you done to Jimmy? He doesn't eat chips anymore. No, see, that doesn't happen. But it's interesting because it's all about people. I keep saying that. I had a teacher call me, last year or the year before. So excited. Yahoo, I found you. I've been looking for worms for 2 years and I couldn't find them. So I'm really happy to find you. I want to do this in my class. Great. Well, she was in Northern Ontario. So in order to save shipping, she thought, I'm going to let the other teachers know that I found worms, because obviously she's not the only teacher that wants to do this in her class. So she put up a big notice in the lunchroom. I found worms. Who wants to save on shipping? And the principal marched into her office and said, there will be no creepy crawlies in my school. And then she phoned me up really upset a few days later, and she said, is there any way that you could write something that nobody's ever died from having a worm bin, or they've never had an allergic reaction, or they've never got sick? And I said, no. How could I? I mean, I would love to have written that, because I can't imagine that anything has ever happened, but how could I say that? And so I said, I'm sorry. And she said, what's really funny about this story? I have caterpillars in my class. I'm doing monarchs. Yeah, but she didn't advertise that, because she was just doing that on her own. It's interesting, sometimes we can just do stuff and people don't know, and then we just apologize later on. That's the best. So it's really, really fascinating what's happening. And municipalities now, with this new tower composter, like this, I was trying to put like a bin like this in corporations before. It's not that easy because somebody has to manage it. Somebody has to do something with this message probably 3 or 4 times. I'm like, I know already, so they didn't pick me. And so the last time was the person wrote, do you know Cathy Caddy? And I didn't really take note of what the content of the press release was, just that Cadbury's had got worms, and I was happy that they had. So I thought, who's Cathy Caddy? So the person who wrote the press release was Cathy Caddy. So I was like, oh, missed media opportunity. Can you imagine? Cathy Caddy of Cadbury's contacted Cathy of Cathy's Crawly Composters concerning composting Cadbury crap in the kitchen cupboard. Anyway, I did call up Cathy Caddy, and I said, hi, Cathy Caddy. It's Cathy from Cathy's Crawly Composters calling. Congratulations on composting Cadbury's crap in the kitchen. I did. I really did. I said, I'm sorry that you didn't pick me. But she said, it's so funny that you're calling. She said, as soon as we had made the contract with the other company, at least 6 people said, why didn't you call Cathy from Cathy's Crawly Composters? And I said, good. So at least people are aware of me. I mean, they're in Scarborough and here I am here. So it was closer, but anyway, never mind. It's just so fun. And I ended up I did a thing at a volunteer thing for Idea City, Moses Neimer's Speakers Bureau thing. And I actually met Cathy Caddy at this event. She was walking around. We all had our name tags, and I was like, Cathy Caddy. I said, are you from Cadbury's? And she was like, how do you know? Because I'm Cathy from Cathy's Squirrely Composters. I called you. It's so fun. Anyway, wouldn't it have been fun if they called me? Cadbury's and all those C's. Because the media couldn't have said all of that. That would have been fun, getting some TV personality to say all of that. Okay, so any questions? Because I'm going off on a tangent here.
Do you have any worms for sale today?
I do. Is Sarah here? Oh, hi, Sarah. Okay. Yeah, I have a half a pound other than Sarah's pound. If Sarah wasn't here, I would have had another pound. And I have worm eggs, too. If anyone wants to see worm eggs, I can just pass this around. Here we go. So if you want to just, I'll pass that to you, and you can. So they're about the size of grape seeds, up to 20 babies in each egg. 5 or 6 is the average, and so fun. Yes?
You said to use eggshells or something else.
Agricultural lime, like calcium carbonate. And you can get that. Does Richter sell calcium carbonate? Does Richter sell agricultural lime? Well, they might. Maybe they'll stock it in future at Richter's. Yeah, so you can get it at, I think it's at, I don't know where you can get it. You can get it at the farm co-op, or the farm supply places. You can get the lime there. But eggshells are easy, unless you don't eat eggs.
How many would it take?
6 to 8 when you're setting up, and then, yeah, 6 to 8 per week is plenty. Yeah.
Can you give us an idea of size, like for an average family, what number of worms or pounds of worms?
Okay.
Size of compost sort of worms?
Yeah, the guideline, if you're putting your own container together, the guideline is a pound of worms per square foot of surface. You don't want to have more worms than that because the worms will have nowhere to grow. So, this is my children's kit size, and this comes with a 1/4 pound of worms. This is really like, instead of getting a hamster with a squeaky wheel, get 200 worms and a little bit of a waste management thing. Yeah, thank you. Yes, and so when people say, well, we don't have a lot of space, can I get your children's kit? And it's like, yes, you can. And I'll put, instead of it comes with a children's book and some accessories. Instead of putting in the accessories, I'll put in 1/2 pound of worms. But the worms really have nowhere to grow. So if somebody is space challenged, then they'll be only able to manage a pound or 2 per week. And that's okay. Like for some people, if they're on their own or whatever, that's about plenty amount. And they just want to manage some. Yeah, so any container will do. You don't want too much depth. The worms are surface feeders rather than vertical, unlike the night crawler that goes up and down.
So that green side there, is that sort of an average?
Yeah, it could be. So you would put a pound. I wouldn't start with more than a pound in here, although you could grow up to 2 or 3 pounds in here. Yeah, my mother-in-law had one of these bins, and this is a good mother-in-law story. She had too much time, even though I love my mother-in-law. Instead of chopping up her stuff, she used her food processor to chop up her scraps. So she had uniform bits, which is great. The more effort you put up front, the better castings you get out of the back. So her pound of worms, in 6 months, her pound of worms turned into 3 pounds of worms. Wow. I never thought it possible. I've never seen a bin with so many worms before or since. And in 6 months, she got 25 pounds of beautiful castings. So I'm the family harvester, so I gave her the castings. I took the extra worms, and so it was wonderful. Yeah, but she chopped up her scraps in her food processor. So the more effort you put in, the finer cast you get, the more worms, the happier they are, kind of thing.
And
Yeah.
is there any food other than the 3 things you mentioned, dairy, meat, and sauces, that they don't like? I heard oranges.
Yeah, there is a toxic element in orange peels for worms. In moderation, it's fine, but you wouldn't want to feed them just orange peels. They need a combination. And that was discovered by a grade 7 student. I can't remember if it was in the States where he was, but grade 7, they were like, oh, come on, how could a grade 7 student discover this? Well, his father happened to be a chemical engineer with DuPont. So, he came by it naturally, the science part. Anyway, so, yeah, so it's fine. And people say no garlic and onions. I put everything in mine. I don't know. I don't think they have bad breath. Thank you. Yeah. Do I want a new project?
Yeah, something I saw on TV yesterday. Apparently, the bags of sun chips
Yes.
decompose in the earth. Apparently, it's the first
Decomposable,
potato
yeah.
chip bag that decomposes.
Yes.
Sort of thing. What would they do with the worms? What would the worms do?
Well, I don't know that would work. You know, just like if anyone didn't hear, it's the sun chip bags now are compostable. I mean, the salt, what about the salt in the bags? I don't know, that's going to cause trouble. But anyway, just like they have the compostable cutlery and dishware now, cups and stuff. It's made out of corn starch or corn something, or wild reed and sugar cane something. Anyway, there's a few different things. I did some experiments with my worms, and it does go away, but it takes a really long time because I think it needs the thermophilic action of an industrial compost. And same with the sun chip bags. I think that it probably wouldn't work in the worm composter because it's mesophilic or even temperature process. But yeah, it's interesting. Why not? Okay, how are we doing? Everybody on? Yep.
Actually, I bought that chalet. So I'm just not quite sure when it's time to know that the bottom layer is composted enough to make another layer.
When it's full, as soon as it fills up, you're going to keep on adding your stuff. I have a chalet in my kitchen. What I do, because I do a lot of these workshops, I know this is what a pound of worms can eat in a week. So I'll take my scraps. It's nicely decomposed by the end of the week. So I just take the whole thing. I just feed my chalet once a week because I have a lot of worms. I don't have time to dilly-dally around. So I just pull everything back, add in the whole bag, the whole week's worth on one side, and then cover it up. So I'll add in some additional paper, and then the following week I do the following side.
Additional paper.
Yeah, so I just go side to side. You could go back and front, or if you wanted to feed them every other day, that's fine too.
So this paper that you add, you don't have to add soil, you don't
No.
have to add that coconut.
No. Nope, you don't need to add anything other than the food scraps and the paper. And then when it gets full, you're just going to add a layer on top, and then the worms will migrate up. Now, it needs to be touching the grate when you initially put your next layer in. And you can see there's these 4 holes on the bottom as well, 4 pegs. So every now and then you're going to go into your next tray. When you've put your second tray on, you're going to go back into the first layer and put shredded paper or some carbon source on those 4 spots so the worms can still make their way up to the next level because they can't jump, otherwise they just get stuck there and they'll just work the cast. It's fine. It's just that you'll have a finer cast anyway because there will be some microbial activity in there. Lots of microbes.
So the bottom, so how do you know it's finished? Just like by feeling it or knowing that the worms are gone?
Yeah, when it looks all converted, it's done. Like even if there's still bits in it, if you're using it for personal use, like you're not selling it, then it doesn't matter if there's still bits in it because they're just going to keep decomposing in your garden.
So you would have to move the paper aside to look at it.
Oh gosh! By the time you get to the third tray, the first tray is going to be finished. So you just put your thing on the floor. You stack this flat, stack your trays on, and take your first tray out, and it will be done. Yeah, you'll know.
It takes like 3 months.
It takes about 6 to 8 months for your first cycle, and then when you take your first tray out, it's not really, really fast. When you take your first tray out, you move the other 2 trays down, and they're already in process. So it's not going to. So then it'll be about 3 months for each subsequent tray of black gold. How wonderful!
So I'm still a little mixed up. So so when you go to the second tray, some of the worms are going up there, but some of them are remaining, like you said at first.
Yep.
In the bottom.
Yep.
So you just leave the bottom for 6 to 8 months.
Right.
While they're already starting
Yeah.
on the top. Some
Yep.
of them.
You're feeding still on a weekly or however often you feed every week. And the guys in the bottom are still going to be working that. Every now and then you're going to go in and put some soil or something in those 4 spots so that you can ensure that they can get up when they're done down there.
So keep doing that.
Yeah, keep doing that. Yeah, once you get to the third tray, the first tray, you don't have to do that anymore. Whoever's still down there, that's good for them. They just stay there. You don't worry about the few little stragglers who are left there.
So what do you do with the eggs then?
What do you mean?
Those little grape things. Can you take them out and start a new?
Sure, absolutely. Now we have chemicals in our skin, so it's best if you don't touch the eggs with your skin. Like they're less likely to hatch. Like if you had gloves or something, if you're going to take out the eggs, you can absolutely start something. But it takes time, right? It takes time for the eggs to hatch. And, yeah. But you could do that, sure, why not?
And you can.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that bin, that small one that you have,
Yep.
it's like something that you'd get. I don't know. You can find it probably anywhere.
Yeah. So the container itself.
Eggs in there.
Yeah. Why not? Go ahead.
What are the costs of setting up the different types of
Oh, the cost. It's hard to believe I'm in business, isn't it? So the worms are 45 a pound or 25 for half a pound if you wanted to do it yourself. Any container will do, as I said. The green bin with a half a pound of worms is $79.95 or $94.95 with a pound of worms. The chalet is $199.95 with a pound of worms. Yeah. And then I have books too. I've got, books to how to do this as well. If you have compost, that's great because you're adding in the soil for the microorganisms and grit. So you don't want to add purchased soil because it's sterilized. So just garden soil. Yeah, if you have gardens, yeah, dig it up from outside. Or if you have compost or a combination would be great.
You can't buy it. You can't go to a store and buy it.
No.
Okay.
Well, you can, but that's going to add the grit in, but then you're still going to need to, it's just going to take longer to get established. And you need to allow your worms to get established before they can eat half their weight. Because it's the microorganisms that break down the food, and then the worms actually eat the bugs. So until there's enough microbial activity, the worms can't break down the worms aren't eating the food, if that makes sense. And actually, as an example of that, I had a customer send me an email, and she said she had just made soup. Could I put the soup clippings in my worm bin? So I said, sure, they love this by email. Sure, they love soup clippings. What kind of soup did you make? And she wrote back, hot Jamaican pepper soup. Ah! Wait! Don't put all that in. Just let me do an experiment. So in the name of science, I did an experiment. I took one of my little small bins, set up the bedding, add a few worms in, and just fed them jalapeno peppers. Yep, I know, sounds cruel and unusual, but in the name of science, I needed to know. The worms didn't get burned. I think there must be a heat-loving bacteria. I don't know, like when it eats the pepper, it must absorb the heat because the worms weren't dancing around like we would be if we had a cut and we touched a jalapeno pepper. So they didn't get burned, but after a certain amount of time, they need variety. So they needed a variety of diet, if that makes sense. So it wasn't the peppers weren't harmful. It was that they didn't have enough variety. They weren't getting all their nutrients. Would I? No, I wouldn't. Not really. No. How are we doing? Any more? Yeah.
The woman who added soup to her worms, I wonder if she put any worms in her soup. It's good protein.
I know. It's true. I don't know. I couldn't say.
Does it matter what size the shredding is?
No. The question was, does it matter what size the shredding is? This is from, I collect shredded paper from local businesses, and I also bought a cross-cut shredder. The smaller the pieces, just like the food scraps, the more exposed surface, the faster it breaks down. But you can absolutely just shred the paper by hand. Or if you have one of the strip shredders, that's fine too. I don't accept those shreddings anymore from people. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. How warm is it?
It's very cool in the wintertime, of course. It's always cool in the summertime, but it would be a great spot for them.
Yeah.
But it's very cool.
The lower edge is the optimum is 16 to 28. Outside of those temperatures, the worms are going into survival mode. And cool really sets them into hibernation. Heat sends them into estivation. But better too hot than too cool, and better too wet than too dry is sort of the basic formula. What you could do, like in my basement, it's too cool. It's about 50 degrees, and I don't know, what is that in Celsius? Like 14 or 15. And it's too cool. Thank you. So I have insulated bins in my basement. Yeah. And now this year I purchased a little heater because it was still it was too cool, and they're really not eating their capacity. They're not breeding. They're not doing the work that They're not doing what I need them to do. Yeah. So you can insulate your bin, or, the chalet's a little bit insulated, so if you had a tower composter, that may be just the thing. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else? I don't know how we're doing for time. Should I keep on?
What's the spout for?
Oh, the spout at the bottom is, as the food breaks down, the juice gets released. So in a single unit, you have to be careful it doesn't get too wet on the bottom. In the chalet, the excess moisture will drain down.
We have to put something underneath.
Yeah, well, so I suggest just leaving the tap open at the bottom, and so it's not going to be pouring out, but it'll sort of just drip out. And if it smells bad, it's anaerobic, so you would just discard it. If it doesn't smell bad, you can dilute it and water your plants.
How would you deal with water or whatever, the liquid collecting in the bottom of a bin? Like, could you use a cooler?
Yeah.
With the spout at the bottom and drain it out?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you could do that. In the single units, what I tell people, if it's dripping out of the bottom, it's too wet.
So you just pour it out?
Yeah, and it's likely in a bin like this, it's likely going to be anaerobic because it's just sitting there, sort of glomming at the bottom. Yeah. So, and you don't want to put anaerobic anything on your plants. Even your compost, if your compost goes anaerobic, like if it smells, you really need to turn it a lot. You really need to make it aerobic again before you add it to your garden, because you're still going to have some of those anaerobes in there. And plants always require aerobic bacteria to grow. So it should never smell like rotting food. And just one more thought about the green bin. And this is just sort of a health caution thing for people. I'm in Simcoe County, and even though I'm in the garbage industry, it's not garbage, it's a resource, but I'm in the resource management industry. And I was aware of the green bin program in different municipalities. Toronto wanted maximum diversion because they have the most people, and they may create the most garbage. So they wanted maximum diversion. In their green bin program, they decided to accept plastic bags because it's easy. If people can put it in a plastic bag, they're more likely to buy into it. They accepted kitty litter, dog stuff, diapers, feminine hygiene, like, ew, sorry. But that's maximum diversion. So they can say, we've diverted X amount of tons. Great. Diverted to where? Okay, I don't know. York Region said a different thing. They said, okay, I think they don't accept diapers and feminine hygiene products, but they accept plastic bags and kitty litter and dog stuff. Simcoe was going, okay, what's Toronto doing? Like, we just got the green bin a year ago. We've only had it 1 year. Because Simcoe was going, what are we going to do? Okay, Toronto's not working. York's working better. Let's not accept plastic bags. So no plastic bags, only food waste. No diapers, no dog, no cat. Food waste. Good. Yay. We're making progress. So when we got the green bin, of course, there's a little container that you have on the inside, and then your big one that you dump it into outside. Because I compost everything, except for stuff that I wouldn't feed to my worms, because it's objectionable. Like me, I don't know, it's oily or whatever, for whatever reason. It took a long time for my little container to fill up. So when I would open it up, oh my gosh, that smell would linger around and smell and just stay there. So, horrible methane. And then I realized, oh my gosh, if you don't empty your green bin every couple of days, then keep it outside, it's off-gassing methane in our houses. Indoor air quality is already pretty polluted, more polluted than outdoors, what they're telling us. And now everybody has a methane off-gasser. How wonderful. And nobody thought of that. When I do speaking, people are like, oh, I didn't think of that. Because it's not, I put my stuff in this bag. Plastic, of course, is permeable, so it's double bagged. And depending on the type of scraps I have decomposing, bananas are generally pretty fast to off-gas. This will blow up like a balloon, and depending on how hot it is outside, too, this will blow up like a balloon. 3 pounds of food. The power of methane. It's really, really powerful greenhouse gas. So you think about the green bin that's sitting there, it's just off-gassing in your kitchen. And we're not even aware of it. So if you don't empty it on a regular basis, just keep it outside. It's still off-gassing methane. but at least it's not off-gassing methane in your house. And, you know, people that aren't familiar with composting will say composting stinks now that they've got a green bin, because people think that green binning is composting, and it isn't. It's rotting food. And it's just education. It's just raising awareness. And I'll say, no, composting is not smelly. It shouldn't smell like your green bin, because that's pure nitrogen. I mean, it's nitrogen that's just off-gassing. So we just need to be mindful that this is not necessarily a great program. Because the government's put a lot, but again, it's raised awareness for people that live in apartments, and they go, well, how come we don't have a green bin? You know, now people that live in a house, they have two solutions, but we don't have, what are we going to do? And I get calls from people saying, I feel guilty every time I go to the chute and put the garbage in the chute. And I say, good. Because if you're feeling guilty about something, you're looking for a solution, or you're going to get sick. Because you're like, I feel bad when I do this. Okay. But tomorrow, I feel bad when I do this. If you keep doing it, you're going against yourself. So that's where I'm getting calls from people. Wow, the government has put in this program for people to manage their scraps, but we can't manage our scraps. And it's a challenge. In multi-res, can you imagine? Like, if you live in a house, you've got your neighbors are your police. Hey, how come the Joneses aren't playing the Blue Box program? How come they're not putting what are they doing? Hey, I bet they're putting their cans in the garbage. And you can sort of, kind of police your neighbors. Not so in an apartment. Because you could put your garbage in the chute at any hour. Who's going to know? Nobody's there at the door going, well, let's see. So it's really, really a challenge. I mean, they're doing pilot projects. They're trying to come up with a way, and they will eventually come up with a way. They'll probably close those chutes because it's too simple. And how would they? I know they've got these 3 chute systems where the chute will turn. So you're putting your organics, you press organics, and then and you put your organics down. But imagine if it doesn't have a plastic bag, and it's just, oh boy, it's really going to smell in that garbage room. Anyway, so it's a fascinating topic, garbage. I don't even know how I got so involved in garbage, but I really, really feel strong about it. And one of my goals is to create a worm growing industry. And prior to doing this business, I worked at a group home with challenge folks. And I have a project, an outdoor insulated bin at Surrey Place. It's a hospital in Toronto where children get diagnosed for mental illness. And they have an outreach program for adults. They've got a coffee shed at Surrey Place that is operated by the partners. And the partners are not employees. They own the business. Very cool. It's a very cool model. And they contacted me because they sell fair trade organic coffee. They have they're doing all kinds of environmental initiatives. So they said, we want to be more environmental. We'd like to manage our coffee grounds and our napkins and our paper plates or whatever stuff that we can. Can we do that? So I went and had a meeting because it's a hospital. Can you imagine worms in the hospital? Yeah. Can you imagine the red tape of trying to get that through? So I said, well, let's look at having an outdoor insulated system rather than having it inside, because that would be 20 years from now, we may make some headway. So we installed an insulated outdoor composter, put 8 pounds of worms in it. This is just a magic program. It's been going for 2 years now. We started with 8 pounds of worms, and there's 800 to 1,000 worms in a pound. So they had a program to raise money called Name Your Own Worm. Pay $1, you can name a worm. One of the worms is called Fluffy. And I can just imagine Fluffy there, rolling around in Ireland going, help, I'm so stressed, but they think I'm so cute. Yeah, Fluffy, the worm. Fluffy, how fun. And I was able to get, I can't remember, $200 or $300 from Home Depot for supplies. The gentleman who built the bin added another $100 of his own money to build this Cadillac. I call it a Cadillac. And I didn't realize the gentleman that built the bin, he's a bugophobe. He's afraid of bugs. Composting is bugs. But not composting bugs. I mean, like the big city bugs, like big cockroaches and stuff. So he built this system airtight. I mean, it was just like there was no gaps anywhere. Everything was sealed and glued and caulked and so, and I didn't realize, we'd added in the stuff, and I just said, okay, this is great, this will be fine. I get a call from them, and they said, so we put a thermometer on the inside, a temperature probe, and one on the outside, so we knew what the outdoor temperature was, and we knew what the indoor temperature inside the bin was. How it works is when the temperature goes down on the inside in the winter is you want to create some of that thermophilic or heating up process. So that's great. So you want it to actually compost traditionally. And then the worms will go out to the sides and they'll come back in when it's cooled down. Well, I got a call from the job coach there, and she said, "Oh, the worm bin is working great. It's 50 degrees." And I was like, 50 degrees? What? Leave the lid off. You're cooking the worms. 50 degrees Celsius, that is. Yikes. Yeah. So if you see this worm bin now, I think I've got photos on my website. I mean, they painted they call it Willie the Wiggler worm bin. And so all the names are written on the outside. They've got it, the worm painted on there. And, what was I going to say? I lost my train. But anyway, so now it's got a whirligig thing on the top. One of those things to let the heat escape. And then we put these pipes in the bottom. So we've amended it. I mean, it's sort of a work in progress. But they're wanting now, there's 6 coffee sheds around the city. They're looking to put a coffee shed or a worm bin at each of the coffee sheds. So it's growing, and these folks go out and do public speaking about how it is owning their own business. And now they've incorporated, in addition to owning our own business, we also have these environmental initiatives. They teach the hospital, the folks at the hospital. Some of the people live in apartments, so they bring their stuff to compost there. I mean, it's really a fabulous thing. And they've created a magic fundraiser. Once a year we do a worm harvest party. So fun. And we get media, so CBC has come and done a spot. And I mean, it's just really, really wonderful what's happening. And it's really, really wet. I don't know why, but it's really, really wet at Surrey Place in the compost bin. So when we do the harvest, it's really, really wet stuff. In order to package it, it has to be pretty dry. Otherwise, it's going to just get moldy in the package. So instead of packaging it like that, we roll it into poo balls, right? And then sell poo balls, which is really great because when you dry it, like they don't do it, they don't dry them out there. There's no time. They just get sold right away. And they make a few $100s every time we do a worm harvest party, like that, which is really great. So they roll it up and then we sell them by the flat. So they're $2 a piece, or, you can buy a whole egg flat of them, or by the dozen or half dozen. And what you do with the poo ball is you drop it in your watering jug. It's water soluble. It won't burn your plants. So the nutrients diffuse into the water, and then you can water your plant, have liquid fertilizer. It's really an amazing project. And so when I go into schools, I say, if your worm bin gets too wet, it's okay, you can make poo balls. And at one school, they had quite an extensive program. They had about 10 worm bins. It was a Catholic school, and they didn't want to, thank you. They didn't want to, so I said, your bins are quite wet. Why don't we roll them into balls and you can sell the poo balls? And sort of were offended. I mean, the kids and the students the teachers and the students were like, "Oh, well, she keeps saying poo ball." Oh, so I kept saying it more. And I said, because we put so much energy around words. It's a worm poo and it's a ball, so it really is a poo ball. But whatever, if you're offended by that, call it whatever you want. So they ended up calling it the name of the school and selling them on Earth Day. They called them, the school's name, Earth Balls. And they sold them on Earth Day. Has a much nicer feel, than calling them poo balls. But how fun. So, and I challenge the kids, depending on the grade, when I go into schools, to come up with creative ways to sell the castings, or what else can they do? And I tell the older grades, I tell them about my coffee ground project and my grocery store project, so I can say, what are the fast food outlets in your area? What are they doing? Are they environmental? Are they managing their scraps? So that they can be thinking about, oh yeah, I go and eat at that place. I wonder what they are doing with their scraps. And to ask, because if we don't ask, we just go along blindly and we just accept what is because we think it's being managed. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to get on a big tangent about garbage and stuff because it's a funny issue.
Sorry, but we have an appointment soon.
You have to go and you want your worms?
And can I just get the worms?
Yeah, I think we're probably over time, yeah. So
at Richters, it's not just a garden, it's a whole new world. For herb plants, seeds, veggies, and more, visit us at richters.com or call 1-800-668-4372.